Support for this program is provided by the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting and from viewers like you.
Hello and welcome to Louisiana Public Square. I'm Beth Courtney, President of Louisiana Public Broadcasting.
And I'm Robert Travis Scott, President of the Public Affairs Research Council. Louisiana's infrastructure needs immediate attention. Well, that was the assessment in 2012 by the American Society of Civil Engineers. Well, 2 years later, industrial expansion and economic growth have only made the situation worse.
Nearly half of the state's roadways have capacity issues, and one study predicts gridlock on I-10 and I-12 by the year 2050. So what should Louisiana's transportation priorities be? Are there smarter ways for us to grow? And is the way we pay for road projects outdated and inadequate? Over the next hour, we'll look down the road towards Louisiana's transportation future. Here's a preview. Karen St. Germain has one word for the traffic congestion on LA1.
Horrible. It's an absolutely horrible place to be going north toward the Baton Rouge Bridge on Highway 1 anytime after 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
St. Germain is the state representative for Assumption and Iberville parishes. She says traffic has increased 50% over the last 10 years due to industrial expansion. She recently requested a feasibility study of adding another Mississippi River bridge in the area.
We put in a resolution to study, actually just bring us information on Iberville crossing Mississippi River Bridge, because it's the only parish along the whole corridor that does not have a bridge.
Lack of capacity is one of the several factors that earned Louisiana roadways a D rating on the American Society of Civil Engineers 2012 infrastructure report card. 62% of the state's roads are in mediocre to poor condition.
The biggest challenge that we face is our aging infrastructure. This is not just a problem here in Louisiana, but nationwide as well. Our roadways, our bridges, are becoming older, and so we need to keep them in good repair.
Sherry Labaugh is Secretary of Louisiana's Department of Transportation and Development, or DOTD. Among the agency's duties is maintaining the 16,000 miles of state highways and over 13,000 bridges. It's been tackling some capacity concerns with its Go Wider program, widening I-10 in Baton Rouge and I-12 to Satsuma.
This has made a tremendous impact on the traveling public on these corridors. I get comments almost every day still, people saying, wow, my commute time is so much better.
But the state still faces a $12 billion backlog of road and bridge needs. Louisiana gets about $630 million from the Federal Highway Trust Fund each year. In addition, motorists pay 20 cents in state sales tax on every gallon of gasoline. 4 cents goes toward paying off the timed program, 16 specific projects approved by voters in 1989. The remaining 16 cents goes into Louisiana's Transportation Trust Fund.
Right now, our 16 cents gas tax does not go up and down with inflation. So we want to attach the CPI rating to it so that it does go up and down with inflation. If it's lower, it'll go lower. If the inflation is higher, we'll get the same amount of money for our taxes that we're putting into it.
St. Germain is one of 8 members of the Transportation Funding Task Force. Tying the state fuel tax to the Consumer Price Index, or CPI, is one of several options the group will consider in September before reporting to the legislature.
We will not support indexing of motor fuel taxes, which is just an automatic increase of taxes every January according to the CPI, Consumer Price Index. That's just an automatic tax, and you really don't have the accountability. You don't know exactly what you're paying for.
Kathy Gautreaux is director of the Louisiana Motor Transport Association, which represents commercial truckers. While opposed to indexing the state fuel tax, Gautreaux says LMTA would support a fuel tax increase spread out over several years. She says the LMTA supported the timed 4-cent gas tax because
it was project specific, it was revenue specific, you knew exactly what you were paying for, and I think the trucking industry and the public is looking for that same thing.
We'll not be able to add any new capacity projects with the funding that we currently have available to do the projects.
Tommy Martinez is the president of Ascension Parish, the fastest growing parish in the state. As state dollars dwindle, more pressure is put on local municipalities to fund transportation projects. Ascension Parish voters rejected a 25-year, $200 million half-cent road tax in 2012.
The climate right now in Ascension Parish is anti-tax, and it's just tough. I mean, but roads cost money, and if you want to have a better transportation system, somebody's going to have to pay for it.
In 2013, Ascension and Livingston Parish leaders commissioned a feasibility study of a privately run toll road that would alleviate the industrial traffic between the two parishes. But the study determined it wouldn't be viable, primarily because of federal wetland mitigation regulations and costs.
You have to go purchase 3 acres of land somewhere at a cost of $50,000 an acre to replace that 1 acre. So it actually would cost you, under those circumstances, $150,000 per acre to mitigate it.
Any future transportation plans in the state should consider smart growth strategies. That was the feedback from participants in the regional planning process Louisiana Speaks in 2006. Boo Thomas is president of the Center for Planning Excellence, one of the sponsors behind the initiative.
About 27,000 people participated in this process. 80% said they would like to see transportation in more compact, developed areas, meaning we don't need, the roads to nowhere.
To decrease reliance on the automobile, DOTD has recently adopted the complete street strategy when planning roadways.
Is it one that could have bicycle lanes? Is it one that could have sidewalks wide enough for a mama and baby and strollers? Or does it have transit stops? So if someone does want to take a bus, they have a safe and convenient place to wait for that public transportation.
No matter what direction Louisiana chooses to go in its 2014 transportation plan, Ascension Parish President Martinez says residents will need to make some tough choices to get there.
I understand the problems with DOTD and the money problems that they have. It's an ongoing struggle. And of course they're doing the best that they can, we're doing the best that we can, and the federal government's broke, so we just, at some point, people are just going to have to bite the bullet and just pay more.
Well, joining me in our studio audience tonight to explore Louisiana's transportation future are residents from the greater Baton Rouge area as well as Shreveport and Bossier City. They include planning professionals, members of the commercial trucking business and chemical industry. Well, welcome to everyone. Well, LSU's Public Policy Research Lab surveyed over 100 citizens on tonight's topic. Well, here's a look at some of the responses. When asked how important building new highways and adding new highway lanes should be when spending transportation dollars, a total of 78% of those surveyed said extremely or very important. A total of 20% said somewhat or slightly important, 2% were unsure. But when asked the importance of spending transportation dollars on maintaining the highways and bridges we already have, a total of 96% of respondents said extremely or very important. Just 3% said somewhat important and 1% was unsure. When asked how important expanding passenger rail service and public transportation options should be, a total of 62% of those surveyed said extremely or very important. A total of 33% said somewhat or slightly important. 3% said not at all important. The final 3% were unsure. Well, turning to funding options for transportation projects, a total of 57% either strongly or somewhat disapprove raising the state's gas sales tax. A total of 32% of respondents either strongly or somewhat approve of raising the tax. 11% were either neutral or unsure. And when asked their support for establishing tolls on some highways and bridges to fund transportation projects, a total of 52% of respondents either strongly or somewhat approve of the idea. A total of 39% either strongly or somewhat disapprove. The remaining 9% were either neutral or unsure. So, there we have the basis of some of the problem. Well, why don't we begin by just seeing among you how bad is the road situation, either through congestion or through the need for repairs. And Keith, I'm going to call on you first. How do you see it?
For me, the biggest issue is congestion. I live off of O'Neill Lane, in a subdivision off of O'Neill Lane that runs into I-12. And my morning commute could range anywhere from 25 minutes to an hour based on what the traffic situation is. I have no real control or real understanding as to what's really the effect of my commute.
How about you, Pee Wee?
You know, I think the tax question, people are sitting longer and longer, getting fed up with, standing still with the traffic. And every day in West Baton Rouge, it's LA1 or the I-10 bridge. They're stopped up every day. You cannot get northbound without a 45 to maybe an hour wait.
And Pee Wee, you're a mayor, right?
I'm the parish president.
You're the parish president of?
West Baton Rouge.
West Baton Rouge,
That's
okay.
right.
And is that what your constituents are telling you?
Yeah, I get calls every day, that, people who run a service business, they electricians, plumbers, air conditioning people, truckers, talking about, they not wanting to pay any more taxes, but they sit in these lines for an hour. You didn't burn enough fuel, not counting your hour and your time that you
Right.
saved.
Right. Let's talk to a couple of industry sectors that we have representatives of here, and let's start with the truckers, and either Judy or Greg, one of you represent the trucking industry. Is that not right? Okay.
Yes, in his reference to congestion, yes. Really, there's been a study done out of D.C. where the dollars wasted on congestion is in excess of $2 billion annually. As far as lost production time, wasted fuel, equipment sitting in congestion traffic. And I think, I live in North Louisiana. Certainly we don't have the congestion problem you guys have. But we have maintenance problems up there. Y'all truly do have real congestion problems here.
Yeah.
We don't experience that.
Let's talk to the folks at Dow, because you have a plant just across the river from Baton Rouge. Tell us about how you see the problem.
I heard twice earlier that it's congestion because of the expansions, and I want to clear that up because we have studies dated back to 1986 that said we had a traffic problem, and so that was way before we've seen the phenomenon of shale gas and expansions. The industry, especially the chemical industry in Dow, just recently announced expansions. We have yet to see the real peak traffic with those congestions. So we really haven't even started to see the bottleneck, and it's bad right now. I travel through Baton Rouge. I live in Ascension. I travel the Sunshine Bridge. I travel Baton Rouge Bridge. I travel the ferry. No matter which way you go around this greater Baton Rouge area, it's bottlenecked.
Well, thank you, Stacy. You with Dow, speaking partly from that point of view. And Paul, you're with Dow also, are you not?
I am, yes.
What's the perspective of getting things in and out from the industry's perspective?
Well, we're having trouble just with, being able to move people in and out. And whether it's the folks coming to and from work or whether it's trying to get deliveries in and out, that intercoastal bridge, which we heard earlier, is really a problem for us individually as Dow Chemical. But we also have issues with people not wanting to take the bridge. And so when you start talking about retention issues, that becomes a whole nother perspective. And people they can't live on the west side because there's not enough housing to house everybody that works there. And so we're forced to take that bridge.
It's an issue that affects more than just transportation. It affects the whole structure of the regional society. Cheryl, you're an educator.
Yes,
what's your view
I
on
was just listening to him say that they were having trouble getting the people in and out. So the rail issue, with 62% of those interviewing saying that they would approve of some sort of passenger rail system, that would relieve some of the traffic. I'm a rail passenger traveler myself. That's my preferred mode of travel, long distances. But I know that we don't have the type of infrastructure that would allow high-speed rail because we would have to not have crossings for that. But we could have some sort of rail system that would eliminate or decrease the pressure of the congestion between I-10 and Baton Rouge and New Orleans. That would take some of that traffic off.
Right, and let's let Jessica take a shot at this, because Jessica, tell us who you're with and the planning aspects of this that we need to be looking at.
Sure. I'm with the Center for Planning Excellence, and what Cheryl said is the kind of thinking that we would like to encourage, that the solutions to the problems on the roadways, many of them lie beyond the roadways. The fact that we have some of the worst congestion in the nation is not unrelated to the fact that we have some of the worst sprawl in the nation. So we need to be thinking about how does our transportation planning interface with land use planning and residential development. And then also, how can we invest in a multimodal transportation and transit so that people have other options?
So it sounds like maybe we need some attention to the roads and work there, and maybe some attention to planning, but it sounds like all of that might cost money. How do we view the issue of whether we should have more taxes or fees or tolls to try to pay for these things? How about you, Mitch?
I'm pretty much dealing with some fuel taxes would probably help a little bit with that. Not really too sure from other aspects. That's kind of where I would go with it.
How about you, Judy? You again, you're with the trucking industry, and how do you see this?
Well, as an industry, we really do not object to fuel taxes as long as we know where our money is going. If our money's going to roads, bridges, maintenance, safety on the highways, we don't object to that. We do object if it's not specifically stated where the money's going to go.
Elsie, do you agree?
I agree 100%, because as long as there's accountability and it's not excessive, it'll work.
I see.
Could I interject something?
Please, Greg.
Well, we are not against an increase in the fuel tax. We just want the fuel tax to not just be on the burden of the trucking industry. We want the fuel tax to cover everybody. Everybody pays their equal fair share. Because as an industry, I know people think, and there are more trucks on the road today, probably than they've been in quite some time. But as a total number, trucks are only about 15 to 18% of the total traffic on the road. And we certainly don't, we try not to travel at peak times. So, we don't have a problem paying, and the federal government's coming with a fuel tax increase as well. They're looking at this same thing.
You think that will probably happen?
I mean, they've got to do something, yes. And so the state's going to be doing it. So we just want everyone to share an equal fair share of the load.
And you want a predictable environment as far as taxes are concerned,
right.
And you think that the CPI wouldn't necessarily be predictable?
I don't think so. I really don't want to put a tax increase annually or biannually in someone else's hands. It's not an elected official.
Victor, what do you think?
Well, I understand that we're talking about taxes because there needs to be an increase of revenue to increase the capacity of the roads, but that doesn't do anything for a short term. Building roads is a long-term project. My issue is, what do we do at this particular time to reduce congestion? I live about a mile and a half from the area that was shown in your piece, coming across West Baton Rouge from LA1
right.
onto I-10. And I've seen the increase. And my question is, what can we do short term to solve some of the congestion problems?
And we're going to bring out a panel of experts, and you can hit them with that question. Cordell, we've got a little less than a minute left. Tell us how you'd summarize what you're hearing here.
Well, I think there's no question that we're nearing the crisis point if we haven't passed it long ago. This is a problem that will not cure itself. I think it's important to recognize that. I think the debate over the exact details of the revenue that is needed to address this problem is probably a minor detail. I think that the critical thing is to recognize that we don't have a choice. We're going to reach a point of complete gridlock. The costs we're incurring today are the indirect costs that we're incurring are almost immeasurable. So we need to get over the idea that we can't raise any tax. We're the only country in the world that doesn't tax the use of motor gasoline at a rate that covers the cost of using it.
Okay, hold that thought, and then I promise you we will come back to that, and the panel will be eager to try to tackle it. Well, that's all the time we have for this portion of our show. When we return, we'll be joined by this panel of experts to further discuss Louisiana's transportation future. Welcome back to Louisiana Public Square. Well, tonight we're looking down the road at Louisiana's transportation future. Joining us now is our panel of experts. State Senator Robert Adley represents District 36, including Bossier, Webster, Claiborne, and Bienville parishes. In addition to chairing the Senate Transportation Committee, Senator Adley is one of 8 members of the Transportation Funding Task Force. Rachel DiResto is Vice President of the Center for Planning Excellence. CPEX is a nonprofit organization that coordinates urban, rural, and regional planning efforts in Louisiana. Ms. DiResto has been with CPEX for 15 years and specializes in transportation issues. Dr. Cam Movasagi is president of Fenstermaker, an engineering consulting firm in Lafayette. He is a former secretary of Louisiana's Department of Transportation and Development and served as director of Louisiana's first ever report card for Louisiana's infrastructure in 2012. State Representative Karen St. Germain serves District 60, including parts of Iberville, West Baton Rouge, Ascension, and Assumption parishes. Representative St. Germain chairs the House Transportation Committee and is also one of the 8 members of the Transportation Funding Task Force. So before we go to our audience to get their questions for you, you've all been back in the green room, and I assume you've settled all these problems among yourselves back there already. So we're going to go down the row, starting with you, Senator Adley, and there's a lot you can say about this subject, but why don't you just hit, concisely as you can, the one big issue you want to make sure you start out with getting across.
I think the biggest issue I heard from the group is wanted to make sure we had accountability and wanted to make sure where the money went. The 20-cent gasoline tax that we have in this state happens to be the only tax that the public had an opportunity to vote for or against. And they came out and they supported that with the guarantee that this money would go to their roads and highways. Now, out of that $600 million a year, there's about $27 million right now going toward the maintenance of their roads. That's wrong. That's a mistake. I believe there's some long-term things that we need to look at, but I think the first goal has got to get to the $70 million per year that's needed for the preservation and maintenance of our roads. Karen and I get to vote on $2 billion of where money gets spent in this state because it's all dedicated away. It's time for us to look at the structure of how we handle our money and inside existing dollars to begin to deal with this problem. I agree with everyone here. It's a mess, and we are behind.
Yes, sir. And Ms. DiResto.
Well, I know we're going to be talking a lot tonight about funding, and I really believe we're almost at a new crisis stage. And I believe that what I want to really focus on tonight are what are we going to really prioritize with that funding? How are we really going to measure the return on investment we get for our transportation spending? How will we know 20 years from now that we're actually improving our communities and not right back here in 20 years asking where are we going to find the money? So I believe there are a lot of creative short-term solutions we're going to have to really evaluate, but I also think the public needs to understand what are our priorities and how are we going to plan for better solutions to our traffic issues.
And Dr. Movasagi, you've seen this both from the industry engineering standpoint and also from inside government. What do you think?
Exactly, and having had that opportunity, I believe our issues in regard to transportation is twofold. Number one, we do have funding problem. Whatever monies that are available for transportation are not being used as they should be used for the purpose that they were voted in. But number two is the structural problem. We in Louisiana are still thinking of 1930s when we went to Baton Rouge and Baton Rouge to do everything for us. There's a great deal that we can do at the local level if we had the ways and the means being the funding at the local level. So we need to start talking about what roads serve the locality and what roads serve the state or the region and try to determine whose responsibility it is to take care of those roads and to maintain them and to build them.
Right. And Representative St. Germain, are you going to make it unanimous that there is a problem?
If I said there was not a problem, I would definitely be escorted out of this room today. As you can see, there's so many pieces to this puzzle. We have lots of issues with roads, infrastructure, new, old, and I think there's not one of us that would argue that point. The difference in opinion comes to how we fund it. Well, we can't blame DOTD with the money they have available. We as legislators need to take the stand and move along with the neighboring parishes and the state as a whole. The state has this problem everywhere. I just happen to be in one of the worst areas in the state right this moment. My district heads into Baton Rouge, leaves Baton Rouge, and it's a disaster.
And how important is it that the legislature have a team member with the governor to make something like this work?
Actually, it would be greatly beneficial. We're being reactive instead of proactive, and that needs to go. We need to start utilizing what we have available and making new things happen.
Great. Well, let's go to the audience now. Lou, you and I talked a little earlier about a question you had for the panel.
Well, a focus on East Baton Rouge Parish and I-10 Bridge. It seems like general consensus tonight, and everyone that you speak with and studies have indicated that the primary problem with the bridge and the interstate is it focuses down to one lane. And if everyone identifies the problem and understands what the problem is, there must be some opposition. And if there must be opposition, hearsay is it's a few business owners in the Perkins Road area. I don't understand how, if it's the legislature's decision, how hundreds of thousands of people in trips can be sacrificed for just a few people, knowing that we can come in and help those people financially to relocate or improve the setting.
And it's a good point. And even though this is a local road issue, it is an issue I hear people all over the state talk about when they drive through on the interstate. Dr. Movasagi.
Well, it is a local road, but also it's a national issue. We are famous or infamous for having the only one-lane interstate in the country, and that is exactly on the bridge. But the issue of that road is not really structural. It is primarily political. The businesses and the people that are going to be affected. Washington Street exit is an issue. What we do with the Washington Street exit and whether that's going to be closed or not, that is a major problem for the neighborhood that exit is serving. So there are some major issues that the community as a whole need to come together and make a decision what we need to do for the good of the community.
Dr. Movasavi, you said yourself that it is a national situation. It has national impact. And yet we're talking about a local opposition. And there are, I think, 6 or 8 lanes already going through that neighborhood. What difference is one more lane going to make?
Well, and again, I mean, agreement has not been reached. To the best of my knowledge, there was a study going on several months back, and I understand that the secretary had to basically stop the study because of those oppositions that had come about. So that is the issue, and we can talk about it. We can get together and talk about it and try to resolve it.
Go ahead, Paul.
Well, the issue is not that the community can't come together. The issue is that we don't have leadership. The leadership won't bring the community together. I moved to Baton Rouge 26 years ago. We're still fighting the same issues we were talking about 26 years ago. And we're still not any further. You mentioned earlier that we don't want to be here in 20 years. Well, guess what? We're here. Leadership, both in the legislature, in the DOTD, and in the governor's office, will not stand up and make decisions to go put the roads where they need to be. Whether it's another lane on the interstate or whether it's a bypass around the city, either way, nobody will make those decisions.
Well, I'll give you some encouragement. For the first time that I've ever seen, and between being a legislative assistant and a legislator, it's been 26 years. It's the first time I've ever seen the East Baton Rouge area delegation, and I'm not just talking about East Baton Rouge, I'm talking about the other 8 parishes, are coming together. The reason that you saw the legislation that we were working on this past year is because of the cooperation. So I can assure you that's better. The problem is the money's not better. So we have to make sure that they have the proper tools to be able to do the right things. But that's encouraging on my part, because when I first started, we weren't all together. But it's different today.
Mr. Resto, is it the planning? Is it the money? Is it both?
It's both, and I was going to say, I think it was recently announced that study is going to be reopened by DOTD, and so I think what the public is hungry for in this case and in every case is, what is the data behind, what cars are getting off where? What does the modeling look like? We really need the facts. We don't want to leave it up to the politics. We don't want to leave it up to just the vocal, opponents. But also think that there ought to be a counter benefit for those who are impacted. And I think that's something that this entire study ought to explore. Not just perhaps, the impact of widening the roadway, but how could those businesses also have some improved streetscape, have some improved access in that area that's highly utilized?
Senator Adley, I think William has a question that's going to apply to you.
Look, I want to add to that before you go to another question. Karen hit the nail on the head. Look, I'm from Northwest Louisiana. I don't have any politics in Baton Rouge. I'm not elected in Baton Rouge. The politics of Baton Rouge doesn't bother me. What bothers me is I don't have the money to do anything with. Even when you decide, I don't have the money. I'm chairman of the Senate Transportation Committee. I was in Baton Rouge, Pee-wee, when we voted for the gasoline tax. I'm one of the people who passed that tax at a very unpopular time and walked this state to sell it, to get the public to be for it, and they were for it. Now they want accountability for that money. And it is a national issue, and it's I-10. It is a federal issue. It is a state issue. It is a local issue. And at the end of the day, it's going to come down to dollars.
And that money's only worth half of what we actually put into it. If you pay 16 cents, take away the timed program and the 4 cents, the 16 cents today, because we did not attach it to the CPI, is worth 8 cents.
William?
Yes, I think the Senator addressed the injustice of the non-use of the tax monies to my satisfaction. But I'm a little concerned that the solution seems to be build more lanes, more fossil fuel consumption, in transportation. And I know we're locked into that, and that's my concern. So I think sometimes having to use a car it's not as bad as not having a car, especially in Baton Rouge, but I would like to see alternatives within the city itself that, so you don't have to get in your car. You can walk, you can use your bike. I would like to see, it doesn't seem like those would be that expensive. It seems like those, there could be solutions like right and left turnout lanes on 2-lane roads that could allow traffic to move. How expensive could that be, So,
Mr.
Like circles.
Yeah, Mr. Movasagi, why don't you address it? Because a lot of times when the engineers look at it, they think, well, we know how to fix this, we'll build another road. And then some others might be a planner and say, why don't we plan it differently? What do you make of that?
Well, you're absolutely right. I am one of the luckiest guys in the world who lives in a neighborhood that I can walk to the drugstore, I can walk to 5 restaurants, I can walk to the park, I can do all my walking in my neighborhood, and I don't have to get into my car. But that is a mindset that we, the Americans that love our automobiles, have to come to the grip with. That there is other modes of transportation. We can ride our bikes, we can walk, and we can catch a bus. But those modes in our upbringing and in our culture has not been part of our routine. So we have to make a switch to accept that. And absolutely we can do that. But the city planners need to come to the table. The public needs to come to the table. The leadership, the elected officials need to come to the table and make that happen.
What about toll roads? What do y'all think of toll roads as a
Well, I'll be honest with you. If we're going to plan for the future and we're going to talk about a bridge over the Mississippi River, somewhere between the Mississippi River Bridge and the Sunshine Bridge, if there's not a toll, we probably won't have enough money in our near future to get it going. I'm hoping somebody can at least drive me over the bridge before
Greg
gone.
with the trucking.
If you build another bridge, does that bridge include some type of bypass for
There's
Baton Rouge? Is
two
that,
or-
I mean, let's don't just go build a bridge like we did in St. Francisville that's almost a bridge to nowhere. I don't want to insult anybody, but let's build a bridge where there's a bypass that helps
Well, we-
alleviate. And those kind of things take
we
more
actually-
than leadership. They take courage. You got to have courage sometimes.
You also have to have planning. And when you come before the public with several maps and plans, and you, like they did with the loop study, and sometimes we talk about the loop study and sometimes we don't, but the issue was what happened in that meeting and what went before the group the next day was we found out that there was not going to be a bridge in that plan. And there was and the money that was going to be put on the 190 bridge to extend it, widen it, make it a better bridge to take that loop traffic was not going to be spent anyway. So when you don't all work together, when leadership doesn't all feel like the whole area is involved, and that's been quite a while, then you have everybody pulls back. So what we see, and we've experienced, Senator Hadley, and the group here, Dr. Camp's just as involved, and so is Mr. Resto. We see the need and the want to do something and to make it a plan. It's not just about a bridge. It's not just about 310 to Highway 70 on 3127. That's a big piece. Then adding another lane, and then talking about the West Bank Expressway. They need it first. They need that side done first.
Let's go to Cheryl, and then we're going to go to Tam.
I was just thinking, all the discussions about the toll, in other states when I've traveled and I noticed tolls, they offer something. When you get on a toll road, that means you have some extra piece, extra lane, so you can move a little faster. So just putting a bridge someplace might not just, it has to be appealing.
You can compare it to the gas you spend sitting in line. You can compare it to the time that you waste between your family and work. And that's really the reason that these discussions have heated back up, because it's about people and real issues. And
well, what dictates that, ma'am? Let me say this. What dictates whether or not it's worth it is everywhere there's a toll, there's an old route that you can take.
That's correct.
You're not forced to take the toll. So you determine for yourself whether or not it's an effective route.
Let's let Pee Wee have a shot at this.
In the loop is not a bad word in West Baton Rouge Parish. I'll let you know that, Karen. But a bridge from LA1 to Highway 30, would go a long way in solving a lot of congestion problems, both on the Intercoastal Bridge and the entire West Bank. But and tolls would work on it, just with the bridge itself. And then later on, we could make the extensions to bring some extra tie-in, some loops to tie into the interstate system. And you could toll that bridge, and it almost paid for itself.
You want to jump in on that?
I want to ask one thing. We're talking about new bridges, new roads with toll. We're not talking about going over here and putting the toll on our airline highways.
Exactly correct.
We're not going to put it on existing roads. It will be on new roads.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Well, it sounds like we have a consensus on that.
That's an excellent point.
No problem.
Let me explain something, though. There isn't a single toll project that can pay for itself when it gets started. At best, projects such as the one we're talking about can generate about 50% of their cost with the tolls that they collect. Down the road, as the volume increases, then they become more and more feasible. So there has to be another source of fund which will augment the revenues that are being generated by the toll, so the project can become a reality. Which now brings us back to the original question of, do we have enough resources to do everything that we would like to do?
Well, and let me add, Mr. A lot of this comes down to deciding who gets what. Mr. Resto, you have a planning organization. Should there be like a statewide planning organization, or is that the legislature or the Department of Transportation?
Our organization does work statewide, and I think what we're talking about is going to require so much regional collaboration and regional, agreement that what is being proposed is the right solution and is the right priority. And I think that's where we have not come to that conclusion. I think
I think the problem is this. Look, the Department of Transportation and Development does have a priority program. We put it in place years ago to try to get politics out of where to build roads and highways. And
that was
we've
a
done
PAR
the best.
recommendation.
And look, it works better than what we used to have.
Right.
It does. But you can take one regional planning committee, put it in a room with another regional planning committee, and they're not going to agree. Because this region is more important than this region. Because all politics are local. The department has a responsibility to establish the priorities. We travel the entire state every year to hear from the public to get those priorities. And then they try to build on them. The problem is you have to have the money to do it. We hear great ideas. And I look at a great priority program every year. But until we as a public decide to stand up to Baton Rouge, to people like Karen, myself, and all the other elected officials and say, listen, we've had enough of this now. We want our roads funded. I'm telling you, the moment you make that decision and you make that a priority, you will find the legislature will move in that direction.
Well, Senator, that then brings us back to what we started with, what I mentioned. We need to elevate the role of the local community in trying to make decisions for themselves and set their priorities, and not to look to Baton Rouge all the time with a hat in hand, going in front of the legislature to see what kind of money is we going to
Cam,
find.
you and I
That's
would
what
agree.
we have to do.
You and I would agree totally. I will say to Pee Wee, a local elected official, if you look at the roads in Texas, most people I talk to like the roads in Texas. Their gasoline tax is exactly the same as ours. But they have a heavy, heavy property tax at the local level. That's right. That helps pay for those roads. That's right. You won't find our local officials out there. I saw one that had a lot of courage in the opening segment. But you won't find many that's got that kind of courage. Cam is correct. If the local government's going to be involved, they are going to have to be involved, and it's not just hat in hand.
That's right. And we, as an example, we had in our feature package, a local election came up, and the local folks said no. And that happens a lot. Stacy?
We actually have a work group. Karen helped us put this together of industry and Department of DOTD and LED. And we got together a few months ago working on some possible solutions because, like I said earlier, our peak construction for our expansion will be next year. And so the bridges and the roads, those new things, that's great, but we'll miss that with these expansions. And so we came together to try and think of some short-term solutions. And what was interesting was on several of those solutions, when it came to the interstate, we were told that that was going to be a federal discussion, federal highways because of the interstate. But it was like that was an end and an answer right there, and it wasn't, well then okay, let's go have a discussion with the federal highways. Right. Senator Alley, what is that relationship? Where is that coordination? How does that look from transportation from Louisiana to the feds?
Well, the state of Louisiana gets its federal match every year. We do. Our issue again goes back to the preservation dollars. That's where it gets back to. That's $70 million on our interstates. We get a match from the federal government 80-20, some of them 90-10, some of them 95-5. So we work very, very hard with federal government when you have the money to match with.
That's right. Tamara?
But there's also...
Let's let Tamara jump in on the conversation here. You've been listening to a lot of these concerns raised. What most concerns you?
What most concerns me is that we're trying to see how much money we can get for extra roads and bridges, but a lot of the solutions on trying to get this money is not what a lot of people is agreeing with because it's too high, too much money we would have to put in. A lot of other states have more high profile businesses or high profile people that take part into providing a lot of that kind of money, and we just don't have that here.
Let me try to shape your point with the panel, and ask them this question. Okay, we've got an election for governor next year, and all those candidates come to you and they say, tell me what I can do as governor. What sort of mandate should I carry in? Let's start with you, Representative St. Germain.
That's easy. Being chairman of transportation, it is definitely about transportation. And what priority is that going to take?
No, I meant on transportation issues.
Okay.
What would you tell them to do on transportation?
I would tell them to work toward allowing the funding to come from the budget stabilization fund that we say is a rainy day fund, to put into an infrastructure bank that we will finalize next session.
That's right.
That infrastructure bank will allow loans to be given to state and local areas that meet state highways, and allow them to pay it back. Well, not allow them, make them pay it back. So it's like going to a bank anywhere in the state. You're borrowing it at a very low interest rate. This amendment,
so it's a revolving loan bank. South Carolina has one of these.
Right.
They've I guess, financed about $3 billion, I think, in money. You think this could work for Louisiana. Now, we have an item on a constitutional amendment in November, but this is not actually going to approve an infrastructure bank because that hasn't been created yet.
This allows the state treasurer to use the principal of the funds he has, such as the AG and the tobacco, not the interest, some of the principal, to be reinvested in our own state. And he agrees. There is no reason we can't invest in our own state instead of sending it, because he does invest it. It is in an investment fund in New York, and but we could use it here.
Okay, so this amendment won't actually create an infrastructure bank, but the legislature, if it wants to create one, has to come back and try to do that in a later session. How about you, Mr. Movasagi, your message to the next governor or all these candidates who are running for governor?
Well, I'm happy to say one of the candidates is very interested in looking at this issue of transportation in Louisiana. And we have had a number of conversations as to what can be done, what needs to be done, and how we can fundamentally fix this so for the future of our children and our grandchildren, we get to the point of having an efficient infrastructure system. That, again, it requires, as I said, financial side. It also requires structural side. We have to fix the structural side of the transportation planning and transportation development. As you pointed out, when you say this is a federal problem, it is and it isn't. We have something called MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization, that represents the community. They can get into a conversation with feds directly, and they can start talking about things and getting things resolved. And why aren't we using that?
Right.
Okay, that's a good point. And you said only one can. I bet if they want to get elected, all of them are going to have this as an issue.
At least one of them has.
At least one. Okay, Mr. Resto, how about you? You've got the gubernatorial candidates in front of you. What's your message?
Well, I agree that we've got to explore, creative ways other states are addressing the funding issues like the State Infrastructure Bank, but I also think that there's a lot of coordination that can happen at the state level if we really look at our economic development investments and our transportation investments along with our housing investments. We've got to get these agencies working together to really look at land use because, again, what's driving a lot of our congestion is our sprawl. And we in Baton Rouge are the 5th most sprawling city of our size. And it's because we're really not addressing transportation and land use in tandem. And it is a responsibility at the regional level, and we've got to do better at the local level there too. But the state has to coordinate those large-scale investments for this to really work.
Okay, and Senator Adley, a man who has run for governor before.
Yeah, I remember running for governor. I remember hearing some of these comments even back then. I have to tell you, if I look at the candidate from governor, I'm going to say to him, give to the public what they were promised. When you give them what they were promised, then they will help you do all of these other things that you need done. We promised them out of that 20 cents that we could maintain these roads. And I'm telling you, out of that 20 cents, there's enough money there to do that. And you as the governor needs to get that done and stop robbing those highway funds to run the rest of the state. That's the first step.
Right, because some of that highway fund is being used to help out state
Well, look,
police.
here's the bottom line. You got 20 cents. We started new projects with 4 pennies. It ended up costing 5 pennies. That's an extra $30 million a year off the roads. Let's take responsibility. Let's go bond that 30 million out. Let's pay that off, and let's put the 30 million back on the roads. We're giving 60 million to state police. But at one point, it was zero coming out of that money. We are taking money at the local level. Cam keeps talking about the local level. By law, we have to give the locals 1 penny of the sales tax. That's 30 million. We've been giving them 46 million. We 46 million. I'd take that 16 million back, put it on the roads.
Let's let Greg answer that same question. Greg, with the Motor Transport Association, you have the governor candidates in front of you. What is your message to them?
Probably just what the senator said, accountability. You know, the time program was project specific, and it was, dedicated funding to those projects, and it was really successful. I think that's part of what you were talking about. You went out on the road to sell. I mean, all those projects got finished, although some of them took longer than probably what we planned. I think that people are okay if they know what the dollars are being spent for.
And the one thing that people say everywhere, I don't care where you live in the state, just assure me that when you're crafting this legislation, that I'm going to be really comfortable in where you're going with the money, what it's being spent on, and it cannot be siphoned off by any other agency in the entire state. And I have no disagreement with that whatsoever. I think that the most important issue ahead of us is to convince people that the state is trustworthy.
We've only got just a couple of minutes left, but let's each of you give a chance on the key issue we've all been kicking around here, and that's tax or no tax, fee or no fee. Just lay it down. What should we do? And Senator Adley, you go first.
I'm going to tell you straight up. I'm one of those guys that doesn't agree with the governor on much, and I have to tell you, I think he's right on this issue. The state of Louisiana's gasoline tax is as high as everybody else. Our lane miles are less than everybody else. In my view, we've mismanaged our money. We need to spend time managing that money correctly. Once we've done that, and I believe she's correct with the stabilization fund, I believe we need to look seriously at that, because I think that's very helpful to the future and bigger projects and what we get done in the future.
Good capitalization. Ms. DeResta.
Well, I may differ with some of the panelists by saying I think we should explore the vehicle registration fees. I think we have the lowest in the nation, and that's funding that is related to transportation that ought to be dedicated to transportation. So I think it's worth it to explore those, along with tolling options. That's certainly in our future. But again, I go back to how we are really going to be thinking differently about the next 10 years and the boom coming, and how we're going to take advantage of not overbuilding so that we can maintain what we do build in the future.
A really good point. Dr. Movasagi.
Well, our problem was not created overnight. It's not going to be solved overnight. So it's really going to have to take a very concentrated effort, a very systematic approach to solving the problem. Funding is an issue. The gasoline tax, the way we have it, is losing its buying power, and it's not buying as it used to, because we drive in more efficient automobiles, we're losing less gasoline. I mean, that's a given fact. So we have to go to a funding system that changes as the cost of living goes up. I'm not crazy about indexing, but I think there are other mechanisms that are available. So we have to look at it, and we have to fix it, and I think we have an opportunity in the next 2 years with the governor's election to fix it once and for all, and hopefully put the state in the right path.
Representative St. Germain, you get the last word.
Oh, Lord, that's never good. Honestly, I agree with the panelists. All have different ideas, and it's all good ideas. And that's what this funding task force is going to be about, that we're going to have. And that's not going to be one of those resolutions that we're doing a study that gets put on a shelf. This is real. We're serious. It was put in there just in case some of our legislation didn't get through. We have to revisit the CPI. CPI rating affects everybody. It's not just a certain industry. It's anybody who gets on the road with gas. We can't accept 8 cents instead of 16. 65, if I think I'm correct, percent of the states do not do this without attaching the inflation factor. And then by the way, I think we're 49th instead of 50th on the truck registration fee. I think we just went up a notch. New Mexico is lower than us. There are so many things that need to come together that we shouldn't have to take a bite out of anybody's apple that is that big. We put the pieces together the right way, we can get it done. And it's not going to be for tomorrow. It's going to be for years to come. But wouldn't we all like to leave knowing that we did something positive?
Well, it looks like it's going to have to be a collection of a lot of solutions and not just one big silver bullet that's going to solve this. Well, we've run out of time for our question and answer segment. We'd like to thank our panelists, Senator Adley, Ms. DiResto, Dr. Movasagi, and Representative St. Germain for their insight on this month's topic. And when we come back, we'll have a few closing comments.
Well, it's certainly a complicated topic, and we didn't even touch on ports and airports and all of those things that go into the transportation.
Infrastructure. At least it's a problem everywhere and not just in Louisiana.
Absolutely. That's all the time we have for this edition of Louisiana Public Square. We encourage you to visit our website at lpb.org/public square. While you're there, take this month's survey. View extended interview clips and comment on tonight's show. We would love to hear from you, like we did from viewers following last month's program, Defining Dangerous About Mental Illness. Jeannie writes, I'm very glad this is being discussed and hope the topic continues so that our citizens who need help can get it. J.K. writes, many people like myself desperately want to get help. Tell people it's okay to get help and show them how. And R. Harville asks, quoting provider number stats is the best the Office of Behavioral Health has for its talking points? Well, we need more reports on consumer outcomes, not number of providers. Well, thanks for those who commented on that show.
Well, from 2005 to 2008, expenditures in big-time college sports grew 38%, nearly twice as much as spending on academics. So, should student athletes be paid for their efforts? And will a recent NCAA ruling give more autonomy to larger athletic conferences, widen the wealth gap of Louisiana's athletic programs? Louisiana Public Square looks for answers next month on Varsity Incorporated, the business of college sports. Well, thanks for watching, and good night.
Good night.
For a copy of this program, call 1-800-973-7246 or go online to www.lpb.org.
Support for this program is provided by the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting and from viewers like you.